This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I'm your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing. Okay, on this episode of One More Thing, we are going to do as our great leader has instructed us. Shout out to Chris Thompson. He sent us over a video. The video is entitled, Black Pastor Exposes the Real Problem with DEI Programs. This man's name is John Amanchukwu, if I'm not mistaken. And we're going to take a listen to what he has to say. We're going to share that with you, of course, and then we're going to respond to it. So, without further ado, here you go.
I'm John Amanchukwu, and I wish that Senator Royce West would be here at this moment to hear, first and foremost, that there are black people in this country who are against DEI, contrary to popular opinion. In 1911, Booker T. Washington wrote these words. He says, "There's a class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs." The question today is, what is the fruit of DEI? Has it fostered unity in school districts in Texas? No. Has it improved reading scores in Texas? No. Has it improved math scores in Texas? No. Has it improved SAT test scores in Texas? No. Has it improved STAR test scores in Texas? No. Has it cost us a lot of money? Yes. So what has DEI produced? Nothing but confusion. 1 Corinthians 14:33 says that God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And so instead of us hiding behind the misnomer of DEI leveling the playing field, it's time for us to wipe the black face off of DEI. DEI purports that it benefits blacks and brown people in America. But it doesn't. It really only opens up opportunities for people who are driven towards trans-zealot ideologies. My hope and prayer is that we can get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic and remove content that is mentally raping our children.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? I want to follow up with your last comments. It's also true for 10 years of DEI offices across our university campuses.
Sure.
10 years that minority faculty recruitment and hiring went from 3.1% to 1.7%.
Wow. Senator, may I add?
Please.
4% of DEI hires in America are only black. They're black, right? Only 4% of DEI hires are black, according to Black Enterprise. And 76% of chief diversity officers are white. And so we need diversity now for our diversity. It's not working. You know, if we get back to the Bible where it talks about loving your neighbor as yourself and getting away from what Ibram Kendi said, one of the leading voices of critical race theory, who said that the best way to deal with past racism is present racism. And so it's time for us to get back to uniting America instead of dividing America.
Okay, so there are a lot of things that he said that deserve a response. And I don't know if you have anything that stands out in your mind, Q, and you want to go first, or if I should just start wrestling through this nonsense, but
You will probably be able to provide a more sound and pragmatic response than me. So I'll let you follow me on this one so you can recenter the conversation and maybe calm some of our listeners down.
okay.
Um, white supremacy, and racism in our country, our current GOP, MAGA, and all of its proliferations will always make room for, space for, provide a microphone and amplification for people who are intentionally obtuse with regards to racism in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And a loud, confident sounding black man quoting Bible scripture is their one.
A pastor at that, yeah.
A black pastor,
Bald headed,
well dressed, cleaned up, well spoken, and articulate,
mm-hmm.
is the champion for their cause.
Mm-hmm.
They will lift up the highest, and you hear the room break into a round of applause as he decides for all of us collectively, because he is the voice for Black Americans, that we are somehow anti-DEI. And I love how they've turned DEI into a 4-letter word that they can just make a pejorative and the country will just accept it.
Yeah.
Again, intentionally singling out the LGBTQ community in his language, using the scripture to support that position, and somehow making DEI anti-Black and anti-God. Again, brilliant in his approach, but intentionally obtuse.
Yeah.
Intellectually dishonest.
Yes.
Or flatly wrong, ignorant, and divisive intentionally.
Yeah.
So you cannot be both well-meaning and intelligent when it comes to things like this.
Yeah. Well, there's some things that he stated, right, that are purported as fact. And this is something that requires, I would have to see where all this came from. And, I'm not in Texas, nor do I have access to that information at present. But if we accept everything that he says at face value, right? Everything that he says is absolutely valid. I think I want to start with one of the things that you pointed out. First off, since he's a pastor, he conflated God with this. He says that DEI, the only result of DEI is confusion, right? And then he goes on to say that God is not the author of confusion, and then he goes down that rabbit hole. Well, that presumes that everyone is confused like he is. And I think that he might be a little bit more of an island unto himself in that regard. And so that whole line of thinking is really just him. I'll speak for myself, at least, and say that I'm not confused about it at all. And I will make my point. So, there are millions of us in this country, millions of Black people in this country. And we have to make policy that affects everyone in this country, right? And it is very difficult to do that because when you have a good idea, it can be a good idea. But when you scale it up, that's when you start to see that there are some problems, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are intended to bring about an equitable go at life in America. And so conceptually, if there's nothing else in this space that's intending to accomplish that, then DEI it is. And what we do is along the way, we adjust it. We refine it. We, develop it, and, it gets better. And the things that are working, we do more of. The things that aren't working, we do less of, right? In theory, that's the way that this would work. Now, for his argument saying that, DEI didn't result in test scores increased in SAT scores and blah, 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 blah. He's looking at one facet of DEI, which is education. He's not looking at employment. He's not looking at healthcare. He's not looking at housing. He's not looking at, all of the other facets that this is supposed to impact, right? He's looking at one. And from where I sit, DEI, the thrust of DEI was so that it could have an economic benefit to Black people. And it would also ultimately have an economic benefit to large corporations because they have more perspective. They can penetrate markets better. They can offend people less, etc. Right? And so when you take something that's meant to be beneficial in terms of, economics, and then you apply it into like an traditional educational setting, it might not fit the same way, right? And therefore refinement might be necessary, right? We have to take the principle, the theory of this, and we have to refine it so that it works in this other separate framework. Okay. The other thing I want to posit is that if Black folks, we didn't just wake up today and all of these problems were our problems. This is something that has taken a long time for us to get to where we are. And my theory, and anybody listening, of course, Q, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, if you feel like I'm wrong. But my theory is if it takes a long time to create a problem, you should be willing to give a long time to fixing the problem. Now, they made a mention of, DEI programs, 10 years, this, that, and the third. I don't know that 10 years has really been, I don't look at the past 10 years and see DEI all across that. Now, you could argue that, the Me Too movement in 2016 had some impact on what access women had to, these programs. But from where I sit, the DEI programs started to kind of manifest themselves sometime around, the end of 2020. So this is the beginning of 2025. So, if we wanted to be generous and call that 4 years, with no refinement to speak of, then I think that his assessment is premature. Again, if I accept it as at face value. Okay. And it lacks the context and the framework that it was intended for. Because again, education and commerce are two different disciplines entirely. Now, he also mentioned that the reason that these programs exist is because people make money off of them. Now, I want to push back there. Because I think the cardboard box industry is worth more as an industry than all professional sports combined. Okay. Professional sports as an industry is a huge industry. I don't know, light bulbs, huge industry, textiles, huge industry. DEI, I doubt that DEI, all of the people put together in the whole country, I doubt that industry measures up to even one of those other industries. It is not a huge industry. And critically, it does not have the power, lobbying power or otherwise, that the gun industry has, or the gun lobby and all these other industries that are well established. This one is smaller with less power. So for people to say, oh, you guys, this only exists because certain people make money off of it. First off, that's silly. You have to show me the numbers of what you think that the activist type industry is worth, because activism doesn't pay. Trust me, I know. On top of that, and I'll speak for you too, Q, but of course I want you to jump in. Nobody wants to make money doing this, especially if you can make money doing something that's more fun. I didn't want to wake up this morning to all of these problems that all of my people are facing, that I love, and then start working on this. No, I wanted to wake up and, rock a party. I wanted to wake up and, I don't know, let's go to another city and, I don't know, do whatever we do. Let's put together a marketing plan for some startup. Let's do what, Q and I, we've done these types of jobs over the years. Let's go to what are they called? Convention, and, check out some activations, or like perform some activations, or whatever. Let's do this type of work because that's more fun. We have to wake up and read all these sad stories about our people getting beat up by the police, getting killed, our agenda getting steamrolled by the government, you name it. Who wants to dwell in this muck? We do it because it's necessary, because somebody has to fight. Somebody has to speak up. Somebody has to say what's wrong. Somebody has to say what's right. And someone has to do it. And the calling landed in our lap, and we heeded that call. We made way more money when we were just DJing and just being on the radio. So when people say that, there's money here, and that it's just it's on its face, it's silly. There is no money here for this type of work. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll give it back to you, is that when we do examine DEI, because the gentleman on the stage that was saying that, the schools or whatever had some different numbers or whatever, you and I both know, Q, that the biggest beneficiaries of DEI initiatives have been white women. And once you exclude white women from the conversation, then you end up with all of these like small numbers that makes DEI look like it's not effective, right? So when you label DEI for black people, but the truth is white women have been benefiting from it, then we get all the blame and they get all the benefit. And, again, without context and, having a disingenuous conversation that, is intellectually dishonest, to quote your words, is unfair. It is unkind. And for this gentleman here, who I guess purports to be doing the Lord's work, not even understanding the premise of DEI. Can you, sir, not look around at the state of your people and say something needs to be done? And if you can say that much, because I would imagine that you might at least be able to get there. I won't guarantee it, but you might be able to get there. If you can say something must be done, then is the only thing you can do attack diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? Can you not offer a solution? Can you not offer a way to refine the initiatives that are already taking place? Can you not develop a framework for this to fit into the education system for your state of Texas? Or is it only simply to criticize what is out there, to give the white man who's on the stage with the gavel the cheesy grin so that he can feel comfortable when he goes back home in his racism and say to himself on that drive home, see, I'm not as racist as I thought because that black guy said what it was I was thinking. Ignoring the fact that 92% of black women and 83% of black men voted the same way this last election. Again, that's about as close to being on the same page about what it is that we want as possible. And if you hyper focus on that little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Dissent, and say, well, this dissent reflects my view of the world. So 92% of black women are wrong and 83% of black men are wrong. And this tiny sliver that actually agrees with me is right. And therefore, I feel insulated from the darker feelings, from the uncomfortable, unsettling feelings that I have where I question whether or not I am indeed racist or that I indeed harbor racist sentiments. I can hide behind, these dissenters provide me the cover to get these ideas off. Again, I'm here to push back against that. Doesn't matter what it pays. All right. That's me on the soapbox, Q. Help me out.
No, not on the soapbox at all, bro. Some of these things are so difficult to talk about because we just don't have enough time.
Sure.
Again, when someone's intentionally obtuse in this way, presenting things as fact and presenting an argument that people will assume is comprehensive,
Yeah.
knowing that they're leaving out intentionally so much context and so much nuance, even taking up the position, which is another part of the masterful plan of those who wish to oppress us, that if it doesn't only benefit Black people, then throw the whole thing away.
Yeah.
Again, this guy knows better. That's why he picked the data points that he picked and left so much room for dissent contrary to what he's saying, but he knows that no one in that room will oppose him. They all want to believe what he's saying. So like you said, they can be more comfortable in their racism.
Yeah.
They can drive home with a clear conscience and not feel less racist, but feel unracist.
Yeah.
The Black pastor, the man of God, told us that we were right, honey.
Yeah.
Told us that we were right, kids.
Yeah.
And they go back to their communities, back to their churches, back to their jobs, back to their benches as judges, back to their places of work and their operating rooms as doctors,
squad
and
cars,
back to their squad cars as those who are supposed to serve and protect.
Mm-hmm.
Forget that these people go back to their jobs and they're not wearing robes, they're not wearing masks. They're the people who are in some cases deciding outcomes for us, deciding whether or not they're going to listen to our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, and our wives when they tell them they're uncomfortable and they're in pain when they're giving birth to children, and ignoring the things they tell them so that our mortality rates are still the highest. You know, they decide how we're going to be sentenced for misdemeanors, you know, while giving slaps on the wrist for felonies for those who don't look like us. We completely forget the roles that these people play in society and question how come the outcomes have been continuously the way they are. It's not because of DEI initiatives, sir. It's the reason DEI initiatives exist
in the first place. Thank you, Q. Well, that's all I got to say. I don't want to give any more time or attention or bandwidth to John Manchikwu, right? So I won't. If you have anything that you would like to offer this conversation, please do so using the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. Let's find out how you feel. Outside of that, of course, you can reach me on all social media at Ramses Ja.
I am Q Ward on all social media as well.
And until we hear from you,
peace.
This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.